Well, there's a ton to talk about with the Book of Boba Fett, and tomorrow night on Tapcaf Transmissions here on the channel, we'll be breaking down our thoughts on the episode and season as a whole. There's one thing which stood out to me all season long as being a break from the status quo in Star Wars media: aliens. I've always enjoyed when Star Wars shows and movies gave some extra prominence to non-human characters. This is a series with a huge galaxy after all, and it's largely telling stories which would impact all the galaxy's inhabitants. But for various reasons, instances of prominent alien characters are usually pretty few and far between. It's usually humans and droids, which I get from a perspective of having to make shows and movies within a reasonable budget with relatable characters, but at the same time it does tend to make things feel a little bit smaller than they could otherwise, and major roles for non-human characters would typically just be in books or comics. I talked about this a fair bit in my video discussing Cad Bane's appearance changes, but largely I do think the lack of non-humans in live action does come down to primarily budgetary and technical considerations, and I don't think that's a particularly controversial opinion. Aside from that, there's also the fact that with most species that aren't close enough to humans, it's hard to get relatable emotions across in a performance, which is obviously important for a lot of reasons as well when trying to tell a story. Book of Boba Fett, though, in my opinion, took some of the biggest strides in live-action Star Wars to broadening the scope of what we may be able to expect from live-action in particular in terms of alien characters. I know there are some complaints about the changes to Cad Bane, and also some more general concerns about the quality of other character designs in specific situations, but largely I think all of them work really well, and most of the changes have come in service of being able to give those characters bigger roles than just sit in the background and turn your head, or say one line and leave, or just die, I guess. Tatooine has always had a decent number of aliens in the mix when we saw it in the prequels and even in the original trilogy, and in episode 1 we had a lot of Gungans or individual bit parts for non-humans, but even the prequels after that point tended to not have them show up quite as much. There were obviously some additional problems with stereotyping and how prequel aliens were handled, but largely the presentation of alien species in Book of Boba Fett managed to avoid that as well. Sure, we got scenes like the Jedi Council meetings and Separatist treaty signing, but generally any given character showed up for a moment, got one line, and then that was it, including in those scenes. In Book of Boba Fett, on top of the traditional Wookiee appearance in Chrysanthemum, we had prominent multi-line scenes and even action scenes for the Trandoshan boss, the Weequay bartender who steps up in Cobb Vance's absence, which I do hope is just some downtime, not actually being dead, though it is a bit annoying that they do seem to be going a bit too far to try to leave these characters all open-ended if anyone wants to use them in the future, but that's kind of just Star Wars. There's also the Twi'lek Garza Fwip and her staff, the Mayor's Major Domo, the Mayor Mok Shaiz himself was an Ithorian, and of course we had the Duros Cad Bane. Even Fett's Gamorrean guards had pretty decent roles, and that's a far from exhaustive list of characters who had relatively prominent roles in the series. What actually really stood out to me in this final episode on this front was the scene between Mok Shaiz, Cad Bane, and the Pike Boss. It was almost a Bechdel test for aliens, though I guess they didn't pass since they were largely still talking about humans, but it was 3 alien characters having a basically whole scene to themselves, rather than solely being background or supporting elements, which is a pretty big departure from the norm, and I don't know that it's something we've really had before, especially in live action. I do think this is something precipitated by the amount of television we're getting compared to movies. While everything looked great to me in many of the episodes of The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett did have elements that would have worked well in movies as well, generally the expectations from television aren't quite so high, so it's easier to get replicable and serviceable aliens and other elements in the show. Movies obviously have higher budgets to accomplish that, but when you have fewer scenes for fewer characters, having the main characters all be both cheaper and more relatable humans makes a lot of sense, with a few alien cameos thrown in the background. On a TV show like the Book of Boba Fett and even The Mandalorian, there is more room to explore a broader array of characters, and I just think it adds something to the world building when some of those characters are not human. We do even have at least one show where the main character isn't human in Ahsoka, and I'd be shocked if we don't get a reasonably prominent role in the future for characters like Hera Syndulla from Rebels, though where exactly that will be, I'm less sure. Either way, that's all for now. Just wanted to get out some thoughts I had in the last couple episodes. What do you think though? Am I overrepresenting how represented these aliens were? Or do you also welcome our new non-human overlords? Thanks for watching. Remember to check out Tapcaf Transmissions here on the channel tomorrow night at 7 PM Eastern for my and X episode and season breakdown. Hope to see you there.